video. That'll make it
Oh.
really.
I don't have a webcam because
I just got home from.
I don't want the
Guys,
CIA.
we're live, guys. We're live now.
Oh.
We're going on our fourth stream for
Yay.
the UWFSA, first one of the winter semester. I'm hyped.
Yay.
My name's Mark Demain. I'm going to be moderating it. I'm also the president of the club now. Just to give a basic overlay of the minimum wage thing that's going on in Canada right now. In Ontario, it went up from pre-2018. It was about $11.40 an hour to up to $14 after the new year. Big increase. And in Canada, that's set to go $15 minimum wage across the entire country in the 2019 year. So is that good? Is that bad? Hopefully we'll find out today. All right, so I was thinking we could go through each other, just give a general introduction, what your opinion is on the issue. Why don't we start with Christian? You're the furthest to the left there.
Do you want me to introduce myself, or
Sure, go ahead.
My name's Christian. I'm a member of the UWFSA. I personally do not agree with the minimum wage increase. I don't think it's doing anybody any good, even though it might seem like it is. But I think in the long run, it's just going to end up either harming us more or not doing anything at all. That's all I got you.
Thanks. I got you. Dee, you're next.
My name is Dee. I am the vice president of the UWFSA. In terms of minimum wage, basically my position on it is I don't really see it as a good thing. I'm a small business advocate. I love small businesses, and I think they need to thrive, and there needs to be more of them, especially here in Windsor. And this minimum wage increase is not doing them any favors.
Okay, thanks, Dee. Justin, you're next.
Oh, good. My mouth's full. Hold on.
It's all good. All right.
Sorry,
Well, you're good? Okay.
Good. So hi, my name is Justin. I am a member of UWFSA, and my stance is I'm actually somewhat in favor of the minimum wage increase. However, I do recognize that there are some drawbacks, especially with how Ontario has handled the minimum wage increase.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Maggie, you're next.
So my name is Maggie Shirley. I am a philosophy student at the University of Windsor and a member of the UWFSA. All this has been so far. I work for a small business, and my parents own a small business in Windsor. And I think that the minimum wage will be absolutely devastating to the economy. The minimum wage increase.
All right, before I move to Zainab, Justin, we're getting a lot of feedback on your end. It's silencing out the voices a little bit. Just heads up. I don't know what you're doing over there.
Wait, on my side, bud?
Feedback.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, on your side. It's all good. All right, Zainab, you're next.
All right, so hi, I'm Zainab, and I'm not in favor of the minimum wage. I believe it's just as our minimum wage does increase, so does the cost of living and everything that else is sold, so it doesn't benefit us as much as we think. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Hopefully we get Katrina on here soon, because I believe she's hard in favor for it, and then Justin's a little in favor for it. Me, I'm in favor of it in theory, but I don't think the Canadian economy is ready, or in Ontario especially, but across all of Canada when we do the $15 minimum wage, I don't think our economy is ready to support that right now, because you have to account for cost of living and stuff too, right? Or even just in order for a minimum wage to work, you would have to have an increase from everything that's above that as well. I know someone personally who's been working at this grocery store for over a decade now, made $14 an hour when the minimum wage was 11 something. Now she's still making 14, and she gets paid to train people who are making the exact same thing that she is, because the market or the economy just can't afford to increase the wages of those people too, to accommodate for the new minimum wage. Maybe one day it would be a good idea, but I don't think it's something that we can do right now.
Cool.
Okay, so I wanted to start it in regards to small businesses and how it affects that. Because in the United States, we have the tax cut that was just put through there. Or sorry, not small businesses, big businesses. We'll do small later. Because in the United States, with the tax cut that just went through, there's been places like Walmart that have been adding benefits and adding hours to their employees. And then here in Canada, there was a big story about how Tim Hortons recently cut benefits for their employees and cuts the 15-minute paid break that they give out. So framing it, is this just big business being greedy in Canada, or is this something that they have to do in order to accommodate for this wage, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there aren't actually a lot of big businesses. There are a lot of franchisees.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And when you're looking at
what's the difference?
A Tim Hortons?
Can you like explain? Okay, like I know like no, I know like a Tim Hortons is a franchise, but what would the different? Okay, name a big business like as an example.
Like Bella Rogers, maybe.
Yeah.
Isn't that also a franchise though?
No, not necessarily.
Let me
okay, I just want to get the difference between the two.
Yeah, because like there's no like with a Tim Hortons, there's an owner of that Tim Hortons, and like they run and they manage it. Whereas a Bell that opens up in a mall isn't necessarily owned by somebody; it's owned by Bell, and it's managed by an employee.
Okay.
Let's say like the reaction, say with the Tim Hortons thing, was that it'll show how much a CEO of a Timmy's or an owner of a Timmy's makes, and then they'll contrast that with how much a minimum wage employee that's working on average makes. And there's obviously a very big contrast there. So given that contrast, is this a necessary thing that these businesses like Tim Hortons that they have to do to accommodate for this new wage, or is this just CEOs being greedy? And
well, I think you have to do the math for it. I mean, I think with the increases, I know the increases for UWSA alone cost them $20,000 this year for all of their employees with the wage increases, which that's a serious amount of money. So I think it really depends, and it depends on how many employees you have, how much money you're making. And some of it comes down to greediness, like how much of your own money as an owner are you willing to lose in order to take the blow of this minimum wage? Because owners are going to be losing a little bit.
Christian, what do you think? Do you think these cuts that Tim Hortons is making to their employees is necessary?
Are you cut out? Is necessary?
I think that the cuts that Tim Hortons has been doing to its employees is necessary to accommodate the minimum wage.
I don't know. I think they're a big enough business, and I think they can afford it. Because people go there, like, religiously. There's always people there. There's always a lineup. I mean, not that I agree with minimum wage, but I do think they can afford it. Like, the minimum wage increase. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't go to Tim Hortons. Me, personally, I think Tim Hortons is, like, total garbage. And but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But I think they could afford it.
Okay. Wow. What about you, Justin? What do you think?
Well, I just thought that when I was looking at the article, I was like, are you seriously cutting out unpaid break time and all this stuff here for just to save money to offset the increased cost but minimum wage increase? It's just to me, that's just lowering the morale of your employees, regardless of whether it's a franchise or a chain. Doesn't matter to me. It's just that from just an employee perspective, just from an employee perspective, and someone who's who's part of the working class, it's like, dude, we want to work for you. We want to show this loyalty to you, and yet this is how you're treating us.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Anything else, Justin?
Yeah. I think that should be it for now for that part of the conversation.
All right. What about you, Maggie?
Well, one, being an owner of a company or a franchise requires a lot of risk. A lot of risk. Is that you put pretty much all your savings on the line to open a franchise. And yeah, you deserve to get paid more for that. If I'm just working at Tim Hortons, I'm not putting in the risk. I'm not putting in the money. I'm not putting in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in stress and into making everything's working. Like, I don't care if people call it greedy. They deserve it. Like, they have worked for that money. They've put in the risk for it.
Yeah, there's nothing greedy about keeping what you worked for.
Just on that, we
and
could have
the article that Justin was talking about is that they're not taking away unpaid breaks. They were given additional paid breaks. They were given extra money if they worked on their birthday. It was nothing mandated. It was this Tim's was going above and beyond, and they just can't afford to do that while paying everyone a 20% wage increase.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. Anything else? Or
Just stop hating on franchise owners. It pisses me off.
all right, last but not least, Zainab, what you got to say?
Wait, I don't think it's greedy at all. When I take away for the paid breaks and all, because honestly, if you think about it, most of the jobs that they do offer here, they don't even pay you for the breaks. So that's something that they had as an advantage compared to other ones, at least that I know of. And also, they kind of have to look at it when the market does go up. Like when you gotta pay the workers a lot more, they kind of have to take a few steps so that their company can keep going as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ada. I think it'd be really interesting to compare and contrast with the United States right now, because not only is there far more business operations going on in the United States, as a business owner, if you can choose anywhere in North America, like Mexico, Canada, and the United States, the choice is pretty obvious. Maybe unless you're in Canada and you plan to sell to the United States, but there they just had their tax cut, and I know that's not directly related to the minimum wage, but with the tax cut, which affects businesses, and the new minimum wage increase here, being able to compare and contrast. So, put yourself in the shoes of a business owner. If you had to put your business somewhere right now, on top of our carbon tax and on top of the new minimum wage, I think it would be very obvious to put it in the United States, right? And that's going to hurt not only the business owners that are already in Canada, but it's going to affect the prospects of new business owners coming in and putting their business into Canada. I don't know, would you all agree? Would you agree with me on that? Anyone want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would agree. Because when it comes to business in general, usually the first question is let's look at the costs, or how much is it going to cost us? Not how much good can we do, how many people can we employ. You have to look at your costs first, and if it's going to be way more expensive to employ people within Canada, then why are you going to go there, and spend unnecessary money when there's perfectly capable people across the border who you can pay. I don't even know. I guess minimum wage varies state to state, but between probably I'd say $8 to $10 an hour, versus our 14, soon to be 15 as of 2019. That, and I mean, if we're comparing and contrasting with the states right now, with all the deregulation that has happened, which is saving businesses quite a bit of money, there's been a lot of reports of companies actually giving back to their employees and giving more to them, like extending maternity and paternity leaves, or raising their wages, giving them bonuses. That's something you see when you save businesses a little bit of money. Here, however, people are on the verge of perhaps losing their jobs. Oh, hi, Khaled.
All right, after D, I'll let Khaled do his introduction. Sorry, go ahead, D.
People are on the verge of losing their jobs, especially when you have to keep in mind, people always want to point to big businesses on having enough money, and for sure they do. But the thing is that 70% of Canadians are employed by small businesses. So 70% of Canadians are on the verge of losing their jobs right now because small businesses just can't take this hit. And that's a lot of people. And I think it might send us into a little bit of a recession. And we definitely need to be prepared for that.
All right, Khaled, just give us a little introduction about yourself, what you're doing, and your basic views on this issue.
All right, I'm Khaled. What I'm doing is that I finished school at the university. I'm working a broadcasting job, and my basic views on the minimum wage is that it's honestly a really bad move. Forget the initial movement of $3 in practically no time. The whole idea of increasing the minimum wage as a whole, it's been proven to be bad for the economy. It's been proven to increase inflation, and it's been proven to hinder economic growth. The big issue with this particular increase in the minimum wage, the numbers are all there. Growth is expected to drop 2.5%. You're going to have lose about 43,000 jobs by 2018. By 2019, estimates show between 75,000 and 90,000. So it's a very bad economic move. It's going to essentially hurt everybody involved, if I'm being honest, whether it be a low-class worker or whether it be a business owner. This wage increase is going to hurt everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Khaled. I'd like to try and make a case for the counter, like for the other side of the argument. I have two ideas. Well, just stick on business just for a little while. To put yourself in the shoes of a business owner, is there a case for you to come to Canada and to set up your business here as opposed to the United States? And if so, what is that case?
Well, if you're a business owner, you're choosing whether to go to Canada or the United States. I'd say the United States is so much easier. For one thing, starting up a business is easier. You have much more, I guess a much more lenient tax system, lower wages, more powerful currency, and overall a much bigger customer. Canada's already at a major disadvantage there.
Well, I mean, in terms of customer base, though, if you have your business inside of Canada, you already have the entire United States as your customer base. Am I correct? Because it's incredibly easy to sell from Canada to the United States. Like, that's one of the things about Canada's currency.
Where you are in Canada and where in the United States these customers are coming from, though.
And what you're selling.
But I mean, we're getting a little off the minimum wage, and we're just talking about business in general now. But
yeah, one reason is that Canada's government system's a little more stable. Is that even when we go conservative or liberal, things don't change a lot, and that can. Where in the States, you can have dramatic leaps in corporate tax rates depending on who's in charge, and that can change every 4 years. Canada doesn't tend to change that much, so even if it's more, it might average out, at least in stability and knowing what's coming.
Perhaps it's a little more stable, but that would arguably be the only real major advantage Canada has against the United States.
Yeah, I did think for an advantage. I tried.
I mean, no,
I don't know if anyone else.
Well, just to add on to that, if you guys don't mind, when we looked at the 2008 recession, like the American government had to bail out the big banks just because they were like, hey, let's make subprime mortgages a thing, which people couldn't repay. Now in Canada, when the recession also affected Canada, since Canada had stronger regulation in terms of what the banks can or cannot do in terms of lending money, they were able to. Well, I guess the system was able to absorb the shock in a way that didn't affect Canadians as much as the Americans did. Hence why, if I'm a small business owner coming to Canada, I would not want to be affected by the validity of the American banks.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Anyone else on that topic? Okay, cool. We'll move on then. Now we're all students here, right? We all go to the same school. I know every single one of you personally, actually.
I'm not a student.
Oh, that's right. You graduated, but I don't know. You can put yourself in. You can put yourself in the shoes of a student, though. Obviously.
Yes,
and, you know what? One of the big problems among students is they can't afford the things that they need to do. I know plenty of students that are living there, like living on campus, have a very hard time affording food or just paying for tuition in general. And the minimum wage could be seen as a solution to that problem, to put more money in students' pockets. What is the argument for, and what is the argument against that?
Well, it is going to be a solution for about 3 to 4 years, and then given the way the economy generally works, and given the way prices adjust and prices go up, it is all going to even out. So for a few years, yes, things are going to even out. Things are going to be a little easier for students, but guess what? 5 years down the road, everything is going to be back to where it was, and there's going to be another minimum wage increase. So you really are just putting yourself in an endless cycle here.
Mm.
That though is assuming you get to keep your hours or keep your job.
Exactly.
So is that? I didn't.
Well, most students who are getting jobs aren't going to be staying there for their entire lives, right? It's just a catalyst in order to get job experience and to update your resume and to get some spending money in your pocket while you're at school, right?
I mean, that's another thing. It's really only going to help students who are currently in, who are currently in school. New students coming in, they're going to take a major disadvantage because for them finding jobs will become much harder because with this minimum wage increase, the job losses coming in aren't going to come from people getting laid off or getting fired. Rather, it's going to come from a lower rate of new job openings.
Yeah.
Well, my hours, like next week, I have 4 hours at work. I used to have 16.
There you go. You see, it's already affecting people here. I've been having a really hard time finding a part-time job, just an average part-time minimum wage job, and and to me, it's business owners might, what is it called? Business owners might perhaps, what was I going to say? I actually don't remember where I was going to say.
Story of my life, Khaled.
Huh.
Oh, Dee, were you about to talk? Looked like you were about to talk.
Yeah, like it is going to make it harder on students. Not only is this minimum wage going to inflate the cost of everything, which I've already seen. I think I've used this example. There's some dumplings that I really like buying from the grocery store, and I've seen them go up in price by $1 already.
And there's something else. Actually, talking about your talk, just cut you off for a second because this is completely about the price increases. I forget the specific product. It used to cost $10.50. Now it's costing $15. The Whopper Wednesdays at Burger King used to be 2 for $5. Now it's 2 for $7.
Little Caesars Hot and Ready's are going up 20%.
Oh, that is a crime.
And they literally put out a letter saying this is specifically because of the minimum wage increase.
Well, what else would it be? Even if they hadn't, like it's just
yeah.
No such thing as the $5 long anymore.
Even I went to Sam's and I was with a friend and she and we ordered a bottle of wine, and on the menu it said the bottle of wine was like 24 or something. And we got the bill and it said 27. So we asked the owner, we said, sorry, but I think you gave us the wrong thing. It was supposed to be 24. And he goes, oh, we haven't updated the prices on the menu yet. And I asked him, I said, is this because of the minimum wage increase? And he's like, yep, we have to increase our prices to make do so we can pay our employees.
Well, how much money?
And he,
sorry,
it was only about like, what was it, from 24 to 27? So yeah, like $3 increase. Which doesn't look that bad, but consider that with like your groceries, with everything going up by like 50 cents or $1. Your groceries, yeah, exactly. It's all gonna add up. Your gas, your car insurance, your rent, your electricity bill. Which, thanks Kathleen Witten, that's already going up.
Yes, another thing to note with that is all of this is stackable, right? Because the price of everything was already starting to go up with the implementation of the carbon tax, right? Because it's more expensive now for grocery stores to keep the heat and the lights on, right? It's more expensive for the truck companies that deliver the food to those grocery stores to put gasoline in their trucks. So that raises the price on that. It raises the price on everything, and then with the minimum wage on top of it.
Another thing, what's interesting, you look at particularly, I just want to talk about the carbon tax for a second. What's interesting about this is that it does affect low-income earners more than anyone else because at the end of the day, a lot of the cars they use depend on using more gas. The more gas goes, they're more, you'll find, generally speaking, richer people are able to afford hybrids and richer people are able to afford more environmentally friendly cars. So this new carbon tax is once again, is going to have a heavy toll on the lower earners, which I think generally speaking, everything going on with the economy right now, whether it's the minimum wage, carbon tax, all that stuff, it is going to affect low wage earners more than anyone else, and I think they need to understand that.
Yeah.
All right, take a short break. We got a new person on board. Sorry, I'll let you go, Justin, in a second. We got George who just joined in on us.
I think
Yeah, introduce yourself. Give like a short little stance on your issue on your stance on the $14 minimum wage.
Okay. Oh, can you guys hear me right now? Actually.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, I don't think it's great. Like I currently work at Freedom, and I know other people that have worked in other jobs and stuff, and they've all noticed that there's been a reduction in hours. So there's already an effect. So I'm completely against it. I believe wage should go, I guess, be increased according to say inflation and stuff. But to just set a minimum standard is let's get to $15 by 2019. I don't think it works, and I think it's going to have bad effects on the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, one might say, because the $15 minimum wage, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be implemented across every province in Canada come 2019, supposedly. Now, one might say that implementing the $14 in Ontario first would almost prepare us for that $15 minimum wage, so the blow on it is going to be harsher than what we might initially think it would be if we started at $11.40 and then we just jumped all the way to 15 in 2019.
Well, I mean, think of it this way: it's really, if you're talking about drugs, you're really just taking a big dose and then a bigger dose afterwards. It's still gonna hurt. It really means nothing. Or we're gonna go up to 14, then 15. That's gonna soften the blow when it comes to 15. Yeah, but you're still going up to 14. All the effects of going up to 14 are still gonna be there. Like by the time it goes up to 15, a lot of damage will have been done.
Yeah. My counterpoint for that is that Alberta, their minimum wage increase like to $13.60. Last time I worked in Alberta was like $12.75 and went to $13.60, and that small increase as opposed to having this massive increase from 11.70, 11.40, right?
I think it was
11.25 or 11.50 here.
Oh yeah. To $14 to me, like honestly, I like the minimum wage increase, but I don't like like I said earlier, like I don't like the fact that it's increased this much. And just for my information, when was the proposal to increase Ontario's minimum wage? Like how long ago was that?
I think it was like sometime halfway through 2017. I could be wrong. 2017.
Okay, so I think that's not a big enough time frame. The way I see it is that if you give business like a certain amount of time, they could potentially figure out something like let's see if I have to put these things in my head. Like ways to soften the blow of the increase in your increase in your expenses regarding paying your employees. Yeah, and yeah, that's what I have for now for that guy right there.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I just got a notification blasted in my head. I should have put the Facebook chat on silent before I did this. I know I brought up the student thing before. I don't feel like we really elaborated on that from like the student perspective as just someone who's going to school and they need more money in their pocket just to get food or something like that. But from that perspective, what is there to like and hate about the new minimum wage increase? Or is there a better way that we could perhaps make school more accessible for students or to get more money in students' pockets while they're going to university, right? Because it's very, very expensive right now.
Could I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the one thing for sure I would like to see is the interest rates of our student loans go down, or at least have it a fixed rate. Because last time I checked, it was a variable rate set by Bank of Canada, like the big Bank of Canada. Not really too sure about that. So I think by lessening the cost burden of student loans, that'll make it a much more attractive option for students to supplement whatever income they make. Mm-hmm. Now, having more money at the beginning of the year and pay off like for school, that's great and all. But then the one thing I do fear is that, and like you said, it's a vicious cycle, is that the cost of schooling go up. But even then, that in of itself is a completely separate issue that we can talk about later on.
Mm-hmm. So I think we want to have a booth about that, though. Say I'm against free tuition, change my mind, or I'm for free tuition, change my mind. Well, George, you got anything to say about that shit?
I do actually.
Cool.
I think it all comes down to whether or not you believe the state has a right, or the state should be involved with subsidizing your school and whether it should have control of managing how much you get paid. And from what I've seen, like, I believe in free markets and stuff. So because the government subsidizes our schools, the universities are allowed to charge more because they know that the students can get a bigger loan because OSAP and stuff have to give those bigger loans. And it's just like a vicious cycle. So as things get more expensive, the schools raise their prices and then you get into more debt, which is it's just like it just keeps going up. Now, let's just say the government didn't subsidize the universities so much. The schools know then students can't really afford then to go to universities if the prices are that high, so they would have to lower it. But because the universities know that you'll be able to get a loan from OSAP to go, they could raise the prices up and not worry about lowering attendance numbers. So it's kind of done the opposite. Like, yes, you can get an OSAP loan and anyone can go, but then at the end of that, you're going to be in a lot of debt. And not only that, as a taxpayer, you're subsidized. So like, no matter what, you're always paying into the system more. It's just, I think there should be, government should come out of it and just allow the market to dictate what prices should be and even what minimum wage should be. I don't think someone who's doing, like, you know what I mean? Like, anyways, you can go ahead, but I don't want to go further into it, but I think there should be less government involvement, and I think that would drive prices down.
Cool. Before anyone else, we just got someone else who joined too. Cassandra Nadine Shawley. I don't know if I pronounced all that right. But Nadine, why don't you introduce yourself and give your sort of brief overview on the issue? Or you can, are you having tech difficulties? What's going on? Okay, well, when you're ready, you can just chime in, and I'll let you have your say. Anyone else on that point, though?
Can I ask?
I wanted to.
Sorry, can I ask like one question?
Yeah, no, anyone can ask a question. Doesn't matter.
Like I've heard of this, like from a couple people of like the eradication of minimum wage completely. And although I don't agree with the minimum wage increase, I've always been one to think that having a minimum wage in general that matches the economy that you're actually in is a good thing. But I've never actually heard like a strong case put forward for absolute no minimum wage whatsoever to let people like bargain their way into jobs. So like I don't know if anybody in this group can give a good
Norway.
Yeah, okay, because like
well, I was just gonna say the left loves to use Norway as an example of how much people get paid and stuff, but there actually is no minimum wage laws over there. So it's the market dictates what your wage is for what job you do.
So how many wages are decided in a lot of these places, in particular in Scandinavia, where there's no actual federal minimum wages, that a lot of them are decided per industry through collective bargaining agreements. So really what's going to happen is that you're going to have an average minimum per industry. And I think that's really the best way to go, because the issue with the minimum wage is that a McDonald's worker and a factory worker, they're not worth the same amount of money. One would be worth a lot less, and giving both of them the same minimum wage, I think, really, again, ends up hurting everyone involved. So really what would end up happening is that a lot of these low-wage workers would have to unionize. And now, given I'm not a fan of, unionization as a whole, but I do think some light unionization is good. And I think within this case, some light unionizations for things like collective bargaining agreements and agreeing upon a minimum wage per industry or per corporation or business would really be a good thing, because that way you're going to have more people getting jobs. You're going to have the economy. You're going to have the economy steadily improving, and you're also going to have how do I put this? You're essentially going to have some real growth involved as well.
Can I put you on pause for a second? I feel like this would be a really interesting direction to take this in. I feel most of us aren't on board with the idea of a new $14 minimum wage in Canada, but the idea of having a minimum wage in general, should we or shouldn't we? Because I'm actually in favor of abolishing the minimum wage altogether. Why don't we go through one by one and have our stance on that? Should there be a minimum wage? If so, what should it be? And if not, what's the case for that? Nadine, you ready?
Hello?
Oh, hey, Nadine.
Hello.
Okay, so
Right, Nadine, should there be a minimum wage?
I think in certain fields, maybe, like maybe not so much of like minimum wage, but more like a standard, I guess, if that makes sense. Students, for example, right? Like, to be able to have enough to like pay off your tuition and your books and everything, I think that there should be something for students, but I don't know about like across the board.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Christian, what's your take?
Sorry, I left and just came back. What are we still talking about?
We're talking about whether or not there should be a minimum wage at all. If not, why? And if so, what should that wage be?
Oh, that's a tough question. Should there be a minimum wage? Okay, you're gonna have to bear with me here, so I can give you a better answer. Without there being a minimum wage, are you saying that every company or wherever, like a place of employment, charges you X amount of dollars depending on the amount of manual labor or any type of labor or work you're doing for your job?
Essentially, yeah. It would be an entirely market-led system. Or let's say, for just for the argument, that the government can regulate products. Like, there still be food regulation to make sure that what you're eating won't kill you. The government can regulate that, but what they can't regulate is the amount of wage that, say, a grocery store or these food factories can pay their employees.
Oh. I don't know. I feel like if there wasn't a minimum wage if there was no minimum wage, a lot of, well, maybe not then, but I feel like there would be a lot of really sketchy things going on. I feel like there'd be a lot of under the table stuff, and a lot of people wouldn't know where's the money. I don't know. So I don't know. I think it's just a lot easier if they give everybody a certain amount of money, like X amount of dollars. It's easier to keep track of. But if they find a way to keep track of how much money a place is giving their employees, then I guess I wouldn't have a problem with it. Because to be totally honest, McDonald's workers or Tim Hortons workers do not in my opinion, I think $15 an hour is a lot of money for making coffee that's not even right. Okay, I've been to Tim Hortons. I've been to McDonald's. The amount of times I get my order wrong is just you got one thing to fucking do. Sorry. But
Hey, Mark, can I just give a direct response to what Christian just said?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so you're saying that if there's no minimum wage, there'd be sketchy things going on under the table.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
why? I'm sure it's possible.
Christian, please let me finish. Because currently, right now, where there is a very high minimum wage, more likely that things happen under the table. I dated a guy who worked in the restaurant industry, and he was paid under the table so he could be paid less than minimum wage. That happens when the minimum wage is higher. When it's lower, what would be the point of working under the table and not doing things legally?
We weren't talking if it was lower. We're talking if there was no minimum wage.
Yeah. So if there's no minimum wage, if someone's willing to work for free, then that's their problem.
D, you're next.
Hold on a second.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go to George. Oh, nope, you're here. Never mind.
Sorry, yeah. I don't know much about the argument for having absolutely no minimum wage, other than the comments that you guys have said. I don't know. I am skeptical, just like Christian, as to what that world would look like. I mean, yeah, I guess we have the Scandinavian countries to look at and be like, hey, they don't have really a set minimum wage, and all of them are doing pretty good. However, I do think it would be way easier for a business to, I don't know, kind of swindle somebody. Because if it's all going to be done with negotiation, that would be kind of better. guarantee you anything, there would be no leftists today complaining about gender wage gap, because you literally have to like bargain for your wage, right? But at the same time, for naive people, like it would be very, very hard to make a living. Like, you know, a 15-year-old who just wants a job at McDonald's to, you know, have some extra money in his pocket so he can save up for like a car or school or something, you know, like, I don't know, like, there's a lot that can go wrong, like bargaining to the point where a person doesn't want to hire you, not bargaining enough so to the point where you're getting paid less than the person standing beside you doing the same job. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that like that it just does fall on like the person to take care of themselves and to make sure that, like, you know, they're getting enough that they need.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence.
Okay, George, you're next.
I think it's more of a moral argument whether or not companies should be forced to pay a certain wage, and whether or not employees should receive a certain amount of wage. I think it should be dictated by the business or by the employee, how much he feels that he should be paid. And if a company wants to pay people below a certain standard, then another company will offer. They're competing. So you think, like, when you have businesses are going to compete for employees. And a business that you could argue that, okay, well, if there's no minimum wage, then what's stopping a company from paying someone $5? Well, the other company that needs employees is going to say, hey, we'll pay you 15, we'll pay you 10, because we believe that the work that you need to do is worth $10. And then you could decide, well, you know what? I don't think that's worth $10. I want to go someplace that's going to pay me more for the skills that I have. So, for instance, when you go to school, you go to university, the life skills that you gain in life, those are part of your resume. And depending on what you've gained in life, you can then kind of bring to the negotiating table why you deserve to be paid more. So let's just say, for example, you go to Tim Hortons. There's no minimum wage, but you say, listen, I speak 3 different languages. I think I should be paid more because I could serve more of your customers. I'm doing more work. So it's kind of like there should be a free market in that your skill level. Like, I just don't even think it's moral that a government should dictate what a business has to pay someone. Because right now, like, there's a lot of people that work in factories that do a lot harder work than someone working at McDonald's, but now they're getting close to being paid the same amount. So I don't think that there's this scenario where people are afraid that companies will take advantage of it and pay people like $3-4, because in a free market, companies have to compete for employees. So if a company is trying to attract the best employees, they'll say, hey, we want the best people and we'll pay you this much. But you have to have these skills, right? So I just think by eliminating that, it eliminates incentive for people to improve themselves, to get a higher education and all sorts of stuff like that. That's my view on it. I just don't think it's moral for a government to force a business to pay someone a certain amount. And I don't think you as an individual should be told that this is how much you're supposed to be paid. I think it should all be on the individual level of what your skills are and what the company's needs are.
I got a bunch I could expand on that just with the factory that I work at right now, but I'll do it after everyone else goes.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually I just want to say something quick. I know you guys will eventually get to me, but George,
you're next, Colin.
This guy just just fucking said about 80% of what I was gonna say. So I just
sorry. But
if you got anything else to throw in there.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, then I guess Justin, you're up.
All right, perfect. Well, George pretty much said what I wanted to say too. Well, I can also expand upon that a little bit too. Like the fact that without minimum wage, workers will now be seen as also a resource, right? Like a limited resource. And like George said, companies would want that resources in order to be productive and generate profits, reinject money back to the economy. Oh, hey, we need more people. Let's hire more people. And like the fact when people say, oh, wait, $14 an hour, $15 an hour, they're going to start automating everything. Well, automation by itself is very expensive, right? Especially when you're going to try and looking at automating, like, task of putting a burger together versus, oh, hey, look, it's breakfast. I can order a McGriddle or something like that. And in that case, like, people be like, you know what? Hey, Burger King will pay me $15 an hour, assuming minimum wage isn't a thing, and McDonald's be offering like what, $10 an hour. I would want to go and work for Burger King. And now in this case, people be like, okay, let's do this. Oh, we can't go to a certain amount because it's gonna negatively impact what our profit margins would be. And that ability to negotiate, I think that kind of, I guess, that exchange between the employees and the employers, well, I think that should be standard practice because, we're people. We're not exactly things and resources that are meant to be consumed, but people who are supposed to be contributing. And then, it's a nonlinear system. The input people put in does not necessarily correspond to the output. So it could be like, twice, like double the input doesn't necessarily mean increase double the output of workers' productivity up to a certain limit, of course. And so why that's actually very interesting. I would love to see that, being experimented on.
I just,
Whether whether that be morally right, that's a different question altogether.
I'd just like to also add, if you guys don't mind,
Yeah.
it's just the idea that minimum wage is meant to be like a career job. Like if you work at McDonald's, that's supposed to be a career. I think it's wrong. By raising up minimum wage, I think you create a society that's not motivated to improve itself, not willing to go for higher paying jobs. Like if you want a better paying job, then go grab a skill. Go get a trade, go to school, do something. You don't just sit there. Like I think minimum wage is meant, if you're a student, like if you're living, like if you're, I don't know. I don't think the minimum wage should be something that you should be striving for. I think you should be going for higher than minimum wage. You should be trying to aim for something higher. And some people might say I'm speaking from a place of privilege or something. Oh, you don't know certain people. That's the only thing they can go for. But no, like you can get into the trades and get paid a lot more. So
let's expand on that a little bit later, though. I'd just like to give.
Actually, just around the point, I do want to say something, but if we're going to cover that later, I'm going to.
Okay, let's let Maggie go, and then we'll expand on all this stuff.
Okay, first things first. There's just someone in the comments who really liked what George had to say because the company that she works for already pays its employees more than minimum wage because the other companies in the same industry do the same thing, and they want to stay competitive and get the best people. That not everyone's work ethic is the same. Plain and simple, minimum wage is basically just saying, hey, you're worth $14 and that's that. So I just think that it's important to include what people are saying in the comments, and we want to keep it inclusive that way. I agree with George. I don't think there should be a minimum wage. I think that the minimum wage, all it does is force companies into paying, like, would we accept the government setting the price for how much carrots are? Like, they're essentially setting the price for what your labor is. And, like, George, that's morally wrong, but I think George pretty much went over all the rest of the arguments.
I don't know, Maggie. Socialized carrots sound like a great idea.
I know from where I work, I'm an assembler over at a factory called RJ Sear. I make $16 an hour there, and I was predicting that when the $14 minimum wage that was coming on, that either my company would have to be forced to pay its assemblers a little bit more to give them like $1 or $2 raise, or lose those employees to other factories that were willing to adjust their rates based on the new minimum wage, right? But it just didn't happen. No company out there was willing to adjust those raises, so we're just kind of stuck here. Like I'm a floor leader right now, right at a factory, at an automotive factory, and I'm making exactly $2 more than the minimum wage. I was making $5, now I'm making $2.
Actually, funny enough, talking about these price increases and the potential increase in the price of wage, I have a friend who works in Sutherland, and the price has been $14.50 before the minimum wage increase, and naturally, because it would increase, people would expect it to go up as well. Now, minimum wage has went up to $14. The wages in Sutherland are still $14.50. This friend of mine, he quit because he expected his salary to go up as well. He's like, you know what? I'm working this job that's worth a lot more than minimum wage. Next thing you know, it's worth about the same as minimum wage. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Or like the case that I gave before of someone that I know personally that's been working at this grocery store for well over a decade, was making $14 an hour and got paid to train new employees that were coming in, and is now making the exact same wage as the new employees, like with experience as much as on day one versus 10 years, and is getting paid the exact same thing. Like, I mean, regardless of whether or not you're in favor of the minimum wage, there's clearly something going wrong there. Like, that's not fair.
I agree.
Shit, we got
quiet. Quiet.
Well, okay. Hold on a second. I heard that there was some stuff.
Add one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I worked as a receptionist in a law office, and I got paid minimum wage. I was an office manager receptionist, and I found out after that the industry standard for what I was doing, based on the programs I was using, was considerably higher than I was making. But I was okay with making minimum. But the difference is that if I had to negotiate my wage from the start of things, I probably would have looked into, well, what does someone make? And not just said, okay, I make minimum wage at my other job, I'll make minimum wage here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hello.
Hello? Okay, it works now.
Oh, perfect. I actually have an example. So I used to work at Canadian Tire for about 2 years, and they were opening up their garden center this one summer, and the manager asked me, hey, do you want to manage the garden center for the summer? And I told him, like, to be honest with you, I was actually thinking of quitting this place. I got offered a factory job where I was getting paid a certain amount. And he's like, I'm like, if you could pay me more, then yeah, I'd stay. Just give me the hours and I'll stay. And he's like, all right, let me see what I could do for it. Next day came back and told me, hey, how about we'll raise up your pay to this? I'm like, sure. I only got that because I asked for it. And because I had the skills to lead that garden center, I got it, right? So a lot of it has to do with asking and searching. Like, I personally, like, if you're not motivated to improve yourself and to look for a job that's going to pay better, like, if a place is not paying you properly, then start looking for something better. And if you realize those jobs require certain skills, then get those skills. I just think minimum wage and the people that want it raised are just people being lazy.
I actually have a question for everyone. More like, and I'm for everyone's opinion, because I pretty much have my opinion made up on this. Do minimum wage increases encourage, essentially bad behavior in a sense?
I think
well, people are asking for more. Sorry.
I think that by increasing
what do you mean by bad behavior?
Hold on.
Okay.
Well, essentially, say for example, I'll give a direct example.
Hold on. I'll let Khaled elaborate on that point first, and then I'd like to direct it so it's just one person at a time, so we're not just interrupting each other and nothing's being said. You know what I mean? Khaled, you go, and then I'll let Nadine speak.
What I mean, for example, is by bad behavior is people often bring up the case that a minimum wage, people would need to support a family. What I'm asking is, with constantly increasing the minimum wage, obviously you'd want that to change. The minimum wage isn't supposed to support a family. It was never supposed to support a family. But would the I guess you could say minimum wage, make people more callous about their decision making, in a sense that they'll make less smart decisions and more bad decisions because, hey, I'm making all that money anyway.
Cassandra, go ahead.
Okay, well, what I was saying was, I think that if you keep on increasing the minimum wage, like, there's no incentive to get a better job. There's no reason to, like, get a better education, to find, a better job or anything like that. People will be stuck, like, working at McDonald's or in a grocery store for the rest of their lives because they're getting the same anyway, right? It's like, it all comes back down to that.
I don't know if it's just me, but you're cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry.
I can
basically.
Okay, then it's probably just me.
Yeah, I think that it just kind of makes people. I forgot where I was going.
I don't know.
Lethargic.
Yeah, but you get the gist.
I wouldn't say that
they don't wanna like work towards anything. Like, they're happy where they are. They're just gonna stay where they are because they're getting the same thing anyway, right? Like,
what
it
you're
doesn't.
saying is, if I can summarize, it's like you think that they're not.
Is that Lewis?
That's me. Society, just trying to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, exactly.
So complacent.
I almost think the opposite is true. Like, the more you have to pay your employees, the more a company is going to be selective about the employees that they pick and how much hours they're going to give them. I think it makes it harder to find like a minimum wage job to start off with and to get that essential job experience in your youth, right? And it might encourage people to be lazier or less willing to go out and put in the work to find their first job.
Okay, but like
Well,
for
we're talking
example,
about minimum
right?
wage?
Yeah.
Yes.
For example, right?
okay.
I work as I'm tutoring people, and I was getting paid before the minimum wage increase, right? So if somebody's already working in like that was paying something similar to what it is now, then why would you I don't know how to explain it. Like why would you leave your job if you know that? I don't know how to explain it. Okay, whatever.
I think there is one argument I've seen from, let's say, the other side that I find somewhat compelling, is in terms of if we expect minimum wage jobs to be, entry-level high school, university jobs, how do we expect things to maintain the hours that they need to? Is that 24/7 Tim Hortons? High schoolers can't work all those hours. University students can't work all those hours.
Quick, before we continue, Lewis, why don't you give just a short introduction about yourself and your general stance on the issue?
Minimum wage? Oh, okay.
Yeah, the new $14 in Ontario specifically.
And
I
minimum
didn't
wage
hear
in
about
general.
that. And the what?
And minimum wage.
Oh, okay. Introduce yourself. Tell us what you think about the new $14 minimum wage increase in Ontario, and then just a general overview on whether there should be a minimum wage at all, and if so, what it should be. If not, why not?
Okay, so my name is Lewis. I think that's the only thing
Hi, Lewis.
can say about myself. Hi.
Hello.
And when it comes to minimum wage, I don't have a particular stance, but I believe that when it comes to business perspective on that, businesses and employers are trying to make the most money by spending the least amount of money. So if you raise the minimum wage, then that will incentivize them to employ more people, because why should I employ 200 people and pay them that much when I can employ a little bit less people and not pay much, like in total, to get the same amount of work done. I mean, there's all factors like how committed employees are to their work, what they do in all their hours. Like, you can literally get paid for being in the toilet for an hour. That's the easiest $14 you can make, and employers don't want that, for example. So, generally, I feel like the higher you put the minimum wage up, the less likely employers will want to hire people, because they'll end up spending more money, especially because they're being forced by law to pay them that much amount. And that means they'll try to actually kick people out of their jobs if the minimum wage increase is sudden. So if I'm hiring 50 people for $10 an hour, suddenly the state wants me to pay them $14. I'm not going to want to spend that extra amount of money from a business perspective, so I'm going to fire some.
Mm-hmm. But can I just elaborate on that for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so a lot of what we said really does. Okay, so especially from a business owner's perspective, if you're in a position where you need to pay higher minimum wage, you have two people that you need to hire. You have, say, an unexperienced 16 or 17-year-old and somebody in their 20s or 30s who has a whole lot of work experience. Suddenly, when you're paying that high minimum wage, you really can't pay both of them. You have to pick one of them. You're going to pick the much more experienced person. What's going to happen there? You're going to have now there's one stat that I think isn't looked at enough called the workforce participation rate, which I think is a little more accurate than the unemployment rate, because in order to be a part of that unemployment rate, you have to have been employed to begin with. And what happens right there is you're essentially, because you're hiring a much more experienced person, this is going to be much, much higher for that less experienced younger person to find a job. Thus, getting into the job market and finding a job itself would be a lot tougher. So you know, a lot of these business owners, a lot of the decisions they make, they do affect everyone, and I do think they really, especially for a lot of these minimum wage jobs, a lot of those are entry level, and they really do hurt a lot. You know, a lot of people who are really just starting off. So I just want to add that.
If it's okay if I could add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like if you look at the Soviet Union, for instance, right? Like economists often attribute like the failure of the Soviet Union due to the lack of like economic incentive. Like for example, like would a worker make a better product if his wealth remained the same, whether he's excellent at his job or he's slack and pretended to be busy? You know what I mean? So that how I like in that sense. I believe minimum wage hinders, one, the quality of products, the quality of service, and number two, doesn't allow any freedom for an employee to have that incentive or have that motivation to improve and be able to bargain more for his skills, like I said before. So, like, I don't know, like you can look at certain case studies, and I think the Soviet Union, for instance, is a perfect case study where the state got involved and implemented equality between all its citizens, and this is how much you're going to get paid, and it doesn't matter how much work you do and how good the product is or how good or how bad it is. It doesn't matter. You're going to get paid the same. And if you're an employee, you're going to be like, well, listen, if everyone's getting paid the same, no matter how the work is done, then I don't care. I'm not going to do a good job because it's not worth my time.
Yeah, if you get paid for working at a call center the same amount as a neurosurgeon, then you're just going to be like, why would I want to be a neurosurgeon? I'll just work at a call center.
Exactly. And a lot of times where these minimum wages now are coming up close to wages that people work in factories who do, I would say, arguably a much more difficult job than, say, someone working at, urban behavior folding clothes. Why would you want to then go work at a factory, say, for $16 and you can get maybe a much easier job working at urban behavior for $15 folding clothes? You know what I mean?
If you look at, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, if you look at like America, for example, the reason they have minimum wage isn't just for like the sake of having it. They also have it as in like a failsafe that actually doesn't work against companies hiring illegal immigrants, for example, or immigrants in general.
Because the minimum wage keeps going higher, companies hire more illegal immigrants, and again, that's
exactly
much trading the lower class.
Yeah, and no matter what you set the minimum wage, it's companies who want to pay less, as I said earlier, will still hire people for less, especially people who are ignorant to the country's laws. Like here I am, I'm new to Canada as a student, and if I want to find a job, I'm not gonna know what a good paying job is for the amount of work I'm gonna put in. An employer can just trick me and not pay me enough.
I mean, that was the whole problem with NAFTA, I think, right? Is it you can either set up your factory in the United States, or I'm not sure what the minimum wage is there, in Canada, where the minimum wage is 14, or in Mexico, where you can get away with paying your workers dirt cheap. Right, so like, on one hand, like with the Mexico thing, you could have a humanitarian issue where it's inhumane to pay your employees that little. But in Canada, you could say, well, you pay your employees too much here, or you enforce the minimum wage at too high a rate here that there's no incentive for me to start my business here. So I'm going to go to the States, or I'm going to go to Mexico because I have no problem paying my employees dirt cheap. I mean, that could be a problem to fix with Mexico too, but for Canada, like it would make us non-competitive, where there's no incentive for somebody to come and set up their business here with all of these things, not just the minimum wage, but with the carbon tax too.
Well, the thing is with Canada, there's already very little incentive, over there to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think really. Canada.
Well, no, because if you're in Canada, you have access to the United States market. And there's an argument you could make there for why you could set up a factory in Canada. It's very easy to sell to the United States when you're in Canada. Like that's what our entire economy is based off of, is trade between us and the United States.
But 80% of Canada's trade is with the United States, so.
Well, yeah, sorry, I got sidetracked there a little bit, but go ahead.
Well, to add a little bit to your trade thing, I think there's more of an incentive that you want to set up in a Western country, even though you're paying more. The idea is that because you're paying more, you'll be getting a better quality product than setting up someplace in China. That's why a lot of times people don't like things that are made in China. It's when you hear it's made in China, you get the idea that it's cheap. And then something, say, made in Germany, you associate with it high quality, that it's of a higher quality. And then that company can try charge for that product, whereas something of a Chinese product. So,
but what about iPhones? I mean, they're all manufactured in China, yet they're really expensive, and people still buy them.
they have great marketing. Great marketing.
Yeah.
And another thing is that
So in short, they're spending the money that they could be using to manufacture them in Germany on marketing. So yeah, they're really breaking even anyway.
Yeah.
well, they're breaking even anyway. And think of it this way: say they choose to manufacture their iPhones in the United States or Germany or whatever, the price of iPhones would go up exponentially.
Well, I don't even think minimum wage is even one of the factors why companies go overseas. I think it has more to do with unions and how unions have expanded in their needs and how much power they have. And I think, honestly, I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of companies stay away. Like one of the big three, the auto companies, why a lot of them moved out of Canada is, I believe, is the greediness of the unions more than say, minimum wage.
Internationally, maybe not so, but if you're going to set up your shop in North America, the minimum wage, I think anyway, would be a very viable reason why you would want to set up your shop in either Mexico, Canada, or the United States. And how much do you have to pay your employees?
I mean, the minimum wage is one out of many things on why this is happening. Unionization also plays a role. Increased regulation also plays a role as well. You know, if you want to talk about labor regulations, safety regulations, you name it. Generally speaking, especially for a lot of these, for a lot of these factory manufacturing jobs, the market in the United States or Canada or whichever Western country is a lot more regular, naturally increasing the price of it.
I'm gonna say it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I'm just gonna say, like, for instance, in China, just their manufacturing capabilities and how they have these mega factories that are capable of producing products extremely fast. The amount of workers they have, there's a lot of what's it called, variables, I think, that go into it, and I think it kind of goes over the minimum wage argument that we're trying to discuss, because we could discuss a lot about globalism and even just how companies like, for instance, South Korea, and how they became industrialized is because the state initiated programs where they took hold of companies and told companies that you have to build this, and these companies specialized in certain things. I think it's a little bit over it's not really related to the minimum wage topic if we're going to get into why companies go overseas and stuff.
I agree. I don't think overseas is a good idea, but talking about NAFTA or your incentive if you're going to go to Canada or the States, I thought it might be relevant there.
It is, yeah. In a way, it is, yeah. Because why would you want to come to Ontario for raising our minimum wage to $15? And you have Kathleen Wynne, who's destroyed our, raised our hydro bills. I think
not even Ontario. Like, if you set up your business here and you know that in a year time, no matter where you are in Canada, you have to pay your employees $15 an hour, and you have no idea how that's going to affect the Canadian market. Like, what's the incentive to come set up your shop in Canada?
Literally nothing.
Well,
yep.
Unless you've got like a like one-of-a-kind product that you want to sell, and you're very confident that you're going to be able to sell it and mass produce it, then you wouldn't be much bothered by having many employees. And on top of that, you're still if you're gonna mass produce something, you're not gonna exactly want to hire many employees. You
have a stronger bank system in Canada. You have much stronger.
Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
My counter for that would be just a stronger bank regulations in Canada that can absorb like recessions or whatnot if it's from the world economy. That's one of the reasons why I would move to Canada, is to avoid, oh hey, look, recession. Oh no, I gotta fire workers. Versus, oh hey, recession. I can absorb some of that, not a problem.
But I mean, I think even the opposite extreme would be a problem too, though, right? Like, let's say if we drop the minimum wage down to like $2 an hour, and then companies could get away with paying employees that dirt cheap amount of money. Like, obviously that would be a humane problem, right? Where it's not ethical to pay your employees a wage that not only can they not live off of or raise a family off of, but they can't live and do anything off of that wage, right? So the solution is in the middle ground there.
If you actually combine that with other government programs, like if government provides quality education to the people, then no one's going to want to work in a low minimum wage, like a low-wage job, they're going to be incentivized more to get educated and acquire better jobs, and that I think benefits the country. In the end, people who get those low-paying jobs are probably going to be people who are in poverty and trying to build themselves up. So it would at least be a good thing for them on a temporary side. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of variables to say that I stand with that, like sternly stand with that point. But I think it should be a thing to think about.
Hold on. We got a new comment on our YouTube from Meg Nerd, and the is a 4. Said, I think this will lead to an increase of devaluing university degrees.
Well, that's already been happening.
Yeah,
it's already been happening. A university degree right now is far less valuable than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't think
the only valuable university degrees are those in the medical field and STEM field, like the very prestigious things. Like you're not just going to go to work at NASA if you don't have a degree. You're not going to be a surgeon or a dentist or whatever if you don't have a degree. But something like business, you can learn to do business on your own. My whole family's done it.
Since we're within that topic, there's one thing that I found really interesting. So currently I'm working this broadcasting job, and a lot of the people there got out of college. Now, what's really interesting is that a lot of these people working there, me and them, we're at about a very similar skill set. Now, what happened when we go to university? I paid a lot more money. I spent 2 more years. And at the end of the day, I'm coming out with a very similar skill set. So if you want to talk about the devaluation of university degree, especially with things outside of medical fields and STEM fields, I think it's very prevalent. Obviously, it depends on the field, but it is pretty prevalent.
I think
Go ahead, George.
It all comes down to scarcity, right? Prior to OSAP and government subsidizing universities, if you really wanted to go to university, you really had to invest in it. You had to work for it. But now that everyone can go to university, and the mentality is that everyone should go to university, has saturated the market. So, before, if you had, say, 100 or say 50 people graduating out of psychology, you know what, maybe with a psychology you could find a job at the time, but now you have, say, thousands of people graduating out of psychology, then it's become worthless. So as you increase the number of graduates, it decreases the value of it, and it's just basic economics. And there's less people going into the STEM fields, which makes it more valuable. And not only that, our society is moving more towards technology and stuff, which there's a greater demand, where there's less demand for people in the liberal arts and stuff.
Yeah, the issue here is that it's incentivized and it's more accessible, and at the same time, the main issue is that anyone can get a degree, which that's I think is the issue. If you're not capable, they should have it not regulated, but more like the I guess the education system should be
have a higher standard.
Have a higher standard. Like, what's the difference between getting a 60% and an 80% on a degree if both of them means you're passing?
On that note, we have a somewhat related question in the YouTube comments here.
Ooh.
My girlfriend asked this, actually. Thanks, babe. What do you think of the correlation between the devaluation of degrees, but also the expectations to have them?
Well, okay, here's the thing, too. You have to consider that there's 3 generations competing for jobs at the same time. And so, like, everyone thinks that so because there's 3 generations all competing at the same time, there's going to be less jobs, right? Everybody thinks that they need to go to university now to get more qualified to have a better chance at getting these jobs. And so, like, that's my point on that. But I also want to bring up that the reason that, they're all competing for jobs is because of the minimum wage increase, I think, because, like, who can afford to live on, like, retirement savings or whatever anymore? All the prices are getting raised because of the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Increase.
In that sense, like, I would say that the problem isn't even necessarily the minimum wage, but the ability to increase your value as a worker, as someone who's seeking to employ you. Like, even when it was down to $11.40, it was still incredibly hard to raise above that minimum wage to get a raise at work or to increase your value to potential employers, right? So from bringing it, if it's already hard at 11.40, bringing it to 14 and then forcing companies to pay people that amount when they were already reluctant to pay more than the minimum wage is going to provide less incentive for people. Well, it's going to both make it harder and it's going to provide less incentive for these people working these minimum wage jobs to increase their value and to try and seek out a higher value as an employee.
Dan?
I want to go back to the university thing, actually.
Go ahead.
Like I said, not only should it be a higher standard thing when it comes to how much you achieve in the university, but I feel like a lot of degrees in the universities are very useless. Like I'm taking media, right? I'm taking communications, media, and film right now, and the more I think about it, the more I realize that everything that I'm learning here, I could have simply learned online. Like we have the internet now.
Actually, can I tell you something? Actually,
Hold on, Khaled, go ahead.
Funny enough that you mentioned this because within the communications itself, there's so many useless theory-based courses that I think will really help no one anywhere. And the thing is, divided, you could either go towards a practical production and a much more theory and based off communications, I guess.
Well,
one is gonna give you some real job opportunities, and the other, there isn't really much revenue. So
I think you cut off there at the end, Khaled.
as I mentioned,
is that just me?
College education will give you a lot of this stuff without any of the theories, without any of the pointless theory stuff. So,
to answer, oh, sorry. If you want to go, you can go ahead, and I'll go next.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is that, like you said, a lot of the theory stuff is very pointless. You spend hours a week to learn it when you can simply learn it by practice. Like, especially nowadays, it's not that hard to make a job off the internet. And in the same way, there's a lot of resources online. You can pay like a subscription of $10 a month to learn skills in video editing software, in just about anything you can do on a computer. You can learn that. There's a bunch of websites. You see a lot of YouTubers are sponsored by them. And honestly, I was thinking, why would I spend so much money in the university when I could have just done that at home while also having a job in a full-time job, since I'm technically free and I can learn that stuff and try to work on it more through the internet. The main issue is that degrees are on both sides. They're actually not that valuable anymore, but at the same time, employers would want to see your degree as proof that you're capable, and I think that's stupid. Because you can, especially stuff like media and film, you can have a portfolio of films you've worked on without actually having a degree, and
I
then
think one thing that plays a role there is that a lot of the employers right now, a lot of them are boomers, and you look at the boomers, they grew up in a time where degrees were much more valuable, and I think really the mentalities didn't really kind of, I guess you could say, evolve. They're looking at degrees, and they're giving degrees the same value they had 20, 30, 40 years ago, while in reality, that's not really the case anymore.
I mean, hold on, I'll finish my thought, and then I'll give the floor to George, because I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Just a basic, this seems like a common sense kind of thing. If university degrees are decreasing in value over time, why is it becoming more expensive to obtain one? If this product
Because
that we're
it's a
paying and
business.
but any business, that doesn't make any sense. For no other product could get away with that.
Are you saying the tuition is getting more expensive?
Yeah, tuition fees.
Okay, but you have to consider this. What is the value of education?
Well, if employment rates among the people who are graduating are gradually going down, then that means that the degree itself is decreasing in value, because the whole point of it is to make you employable. If it can't succeed in doing that one thing, its market value should be going down.
And that's why universities make it more expensive to give the illusion that it's still valuable, so that people apply. And honestly, saying that, I feel guilty in applying to university.
All right, George, floor is yours.
I'll add that, and I'll Well,
hold on. George has been waiting. Let him go.
okay.
Yeah,
So there's a few variables there, and I would say there's one of them is government. The reason why a product like university, if you want to call it a product, can keep raising prices even though the value of it keeps decreasing is because it's really one of the only products that government has a hand in subsidizing. And you have banks that are willing to give that money to students. And not only that, University No More is something that you can just go to and get a bachelor's degree and be like, okay, I'm all said and done. A bachelor's degree has now become a stepping stone to get your master's, to go into a graduate program. So that's where it holds its value. But you have to have that knowledge to know that you have to understand that, you know what, now that everyone has a bachelor's degree, you have to use that bachelor's degree to move even further to get, say, your master's, to get your doctorate, to go into a graduate school. So for me, for instance, I'm in political science. And I've already graduated, but I'm going back. Why? Because I know I'm going to be competing against a bunch of other people with political science degrees. I need to go to graduate school. So that's the reason why I think it still has that value, is because if you want to go into the upper levels, because if you look at top income earners, they do have graduate degrees. And the only way to get to a graduate degree is to get that bachelor's degree. So those are the couple variables I would say why it could still hold value and why it's unique to other products, even though it's declining in value, is because the government has a hand in it.
Maggie, you wanted to say something.
Very similar to what George wanted to say, that, well, yes, they're becoming less valuable in that a university degree used to get you a really good job and now it doesn't. The reason the cost is still so high is because now it's mandatory to get a job with importance. They've become so devalued that they're necessary.
Wait. You need a degree to make coffee.
I'm exaggerating, but...
Oh, okay. I thought you were like, I thought it was actually serious. Oh my god.
No.
I mean, not that low, but like, if you want to manage in retail, if you want to be a general manager in retail, which used to be a very basic job, you have to have a degree to do that now. If you want to stock shelves, you don't need a degree. But just to go at all above that, you need a degree.
Jesus.
But like you were saying, you can get most of your material online for free, but no one will take you seriously if you do that.
Unless you have a good portfolio. It's really about like the arts, I guess. Like if you have a portfolio in making film, it's like you don't need the degree to be accepted or to be commissioned for something.
Well,
but when it comes to business stuff, it's not that easy.
Yeah, way back when, my dad was looking for a job. I think he applied at Ford. And he got really far into the interview process. And they're like, okay, now I'll just need proof of your degree. He's like, I don't have a degree. They're like, oh. Well, he's like, I have a diploma in mainframe computers. And they're like, well, no, you need a degree to work here. He's like, you were impressed with me. I know everything you need me to know. I can solve any of your IT problems. Why can't I? And they're like, because if you have a degree, we know you have student loans, and we know you won't be leaving us soon.
There's an old man in who takes my film courses with me. He's like in his 80s, I believe, or 70s, and the guy has worked in movies, has acted in movies, has been on set most of his life, and he's just taking the courses here to know the terminology. Can you believe that? Like, the guy has nothing to do. He's just taking the course to know the terminology. Yet he's basically proof that you can work in film your whole life and make money off of it without really needing university. And another example is my father doesn't have I don't think he even has a high school degree. Yet he now owns a multi-million-dollar company because he worked his ass off on it.
No, that's another example would be my brother. My brother was doing business and 2 years in decided to drop out. And now he's an owner of a company called Green City Plastics. And his idea was, you know what, most of these people that graduate out of business end up working for someone. I want to be my own CEO. I don't need to go to school and learn this theory. I just have to have the motivation and research with a field that I want to go into and be my own boss. And he took that initiative as, say, an entrepreneur and did it himself. And now he has a company.
Oh, sorry. I hate to be that guy, but like honestly, the more you think about it, the only thing you learn from school is that you learn nothing from school. And I mean, when you look at it, the top most richest people are people who have made innovations without being educated. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, I don't know, the guy who owns Amazon. You know, like these people didn't invest themselves into learning at a university and working for someone. They simply worked in the field they wanted to work in and made it somewhere.
I would.
And built their companies off of that. And I feel like the issue is that you when you go to university, you're being taught what is and what isn't good, and what you should and shouldn't do. And I feel like usually, like when you take big risks, you're actually, most of the time you get good reward out of it if you know what you're doing. And the less people that take risks and don't innovate and just focus on the business aspect, like we see today, a lot of companies in whatever field you want to look at, be it music, movies, video games, anything, businesses don't like to take long-term risks. They simply go with a short-term thing.
Yeah,
and,
but I would.
Yeah,
I would say also it depends on the field you go into, right? Like, you want to be a cancer researcher, then you need to go to a university because it has the facilities and the resources. So you could, if you want to study how to, fight cancer, you wouldn't be able to do that, let's say, at home. You wouldn't have that lab. So sometimes, depending on the field that you're going into, whether it's engineering or such, I think in a way, for those fields, it is essential to go into, like, say, medical school or whatever, because you're not going to be able to get cadavers at your house. No matter how much you study the anatomy of the human body on Google, you do need an institution with those resources. But when it comes down to, like, say, something like media, in which a lot of these people use YouTube as a platform and social media to promote themselves, even if you look at, like, say, for instance, Milo, like, you'll have a journalist that will go to university to be a journalist, and you have someone who like Milo, who dropped out of university but created a personality for himself, and he has his own publications, and he's written for other websites like Breitbart and stuff without that university degree, but because of his portfolio and stuff that he's done. So I think it all depends on the field as well that you're going to be going into.
Yeah. I know someone in Washington who's basically worked for a company and just now he owns it, really, without needing a degree. He simply just worked on his merit.
Yeah. By the way, guys, I gotta get off in 2 minutes.
Yeah, no problem, George. I'm hoping to wrap it up within a half hour anyway. I think 2 hours is a good length to keep it if we go that long. We got another question here from Evil Warrior 2000. What if the point of university is to prove? What if the point of university is to prove work ethic?
University, honestly, okay. Like, I'm studying STEM, so some of the stuff that I do isn't totally a waste of time, but like, it's a huge waste of time. Roughly speaking, like, depending on what you're studying, it is don't go. If you're studying something like anthropology, what are you going to be? You're going to go to the anthropology store and be an anthropologist and answer anthropology questions for like $20 a pop? No, you're wasting your time. You're not going to be an archaeologist. Archaeologists, who's going to hire you? What are you going to do? You're going to go to Egypt and dig a hole with what funding? No, it's a huge waste of time. And no, I've had like GAs tell me like okay, I was doing a lab and I'm doing it this one way, and the GA is like, no, do it this other way. That's supposed to be done. I'm like, but I did it the same way. Like, if I do it that way, it's just gonna waste time and take longer. He's like, yeah, a lot of things you do in university are a waste of time. I'm like, you're not really selling this for me. Like, come on, meet me halfway here. Like, I'm doing the work. They're just trying to waste your time and take your money. And I agree that there are some things you need to go to university for, like STEM, like George said. If you want to be a neurosurgeon, you gotta go to university, do the labs, get the experience, see the stuff firsthand. But like, stay home if you think that you're gonna be like a CEO of a company because you're taking like a women's studies class. Like, no,
Hey, hi, Dad. Look, I'm dropping out of university. I just don't see any reason. Like, really, man. I'm just gonna call my father tomorrow and tell him, hey, you're wasting a lot of money on me. I'm coming back home.
My basic stance is, I think work ethic should be something that you should be proving on the job. Like, say, take a trade job, for example. If you want to become an electrician, say you go to St. Clair and you take some courses to become an electrician and you become part of the union. No, you don't just become a fully certified electrician right out of St. Clair, right? You become an electrician's apprentice, and then after so many years, I think it's at minimum 5 years, you become a journeyman. And then after so much time, you become an electrician's apprentice. After you have the opportunity to have so much experience in that job, right? Your value increases the more that you do your job, the better you get at it. And if you don't get any better, you don't succeed in that field.
Well, I think it's mostly like the employers don't want to take the risk of employing somebody who, might not be what they're looking for. They want to see on paper that this person is, what they want.
Yeah, a lot of it is basically risk management. That, again, once again, if you want to talk about an increasing minimum wage, again, given that that's the actual topic, when the minimum wage going up, as an employer, you're really going to look for the most, the safest, most risk-effective way, which is a lot of the time hiring somebody with a university degree, because that does give the employer a sense of, I guess you could say, safety in a way.
Well, yeah,
but at the same time, it makes no sense because the person with the university degree could be the best guy at the job or the worst. You just memorize the stuff in the books and got a good grade.
I completely agree, though. Again, from a business owner's perspective, you really don't know what this person you're hiring is like. You're really looking at background, arbitrary information, and for example, in something like media, yes, something like a portfolio is going to do that job. But when you have fields like, say, again, it's it's a STEM-related field, in particular. A lot of the time, a degree does offer that kind of sense of security in a way to the employer, because there isn't really a lot of information to go by with that person to begin with.
Well,
so.
I'll just say this. One thing, I'll tell you personally myself, if I looked at myself prior to go to university and now, and from an employer's perspective, I've become, even though, say, what job I get, they're not going to ask, what's the difference between realist and liberal theory on geopolitics is, but the skill that I did gain by learning all that and writing essays on it is the ability to do research, the ability to write more efficiently, the point of university is so that you're able to critically think more, to think more outside the box. And those are more, I guess, skills that you do gain from a degree. And that's, I think, maybe why employers want it, is that they don't really care if you can talk about Marxist theory, but they want to know that, this guy went to university and he did get in the skill of being able to do research. He did get he should have at least gained the skill to be able to critically think, even though now in universities are more about indoctrination and not critical think, more of, if you think a certain way, you're a fascist. But that was the whole concept of university, was the ability to gain critical thinking skills and research, and ability to do research a lot more efficiently. And those are certain qualities that could be, that are, I guess, beneficial to certain employers when they're looking at someone versus someone who doesn't have that university degree. So I think there is some positives in it. But back to saying, yeah, if you're going into psychology and you just think you're going to get a bachelor's degree and become a psychologist, no, you're not going to get a job. You better be going for that doctor's degree or you're wasting your time.
To interject, sorry, we got a little sidetracked, I feel, which is fine, but I want to try and steer it more about the minimum wage specifically. Realistically, if we take it as true that this, if we agree that the new minimum wage is going to close off job opportunities for high school students that are trying to find their first job, then realistically, where this void is going to be filled is with people who are graduating from university and have these degrees but can't find an opportunity to get a higher paying job. Like nobody's going to be going to university with the intent of paying tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for a bachelor's degree and then start making $14 an hour after they graduate.
Yeah. Well, guys, I'm out. Enjoyed this.
All right.
Oh, yeah. See you, George.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, no. Nobody goes to university to make them a better candidate for a minimum wage job, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you need to get a job. You need to get a minimum wage job so you can build work skills so you can get a proper job when you graduate, and that's something that we're not seeing anymore. The only alternative that I've heard of is internships, and I believe that with what we're talking about with the minimum wage, I think that everyone can agree that internships are not good because you're not making anything.
That's a whole other problem. I heard that the Jagmeet Singh government, if it gets elected, wants to get rid of unpaid internships altogether, and he wants to make them all mandatorily paid minimum wage, which he wants to be 15 an hour as well. So.
Well,
But
that's
you're
been
going
going
to be
on.
dealing with much less. You're not going to be dealing with a lot of internships if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can see it working if only internships have the minimum wage applied to them. Considering that internships are supposed to be to give you skills. So then it comes to what people want to do. Do you want to get a job with the risk of having low wage based on what the employer wants to pay you, or do you want to get an internship, which I believe at that point not many people want to get? So would you want to get an internship that pays you this set minimum wage at least, so you can build your job skills or portfolio or whatever, so you can actually move on to a better paying job in general?
Nadine, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, so I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I was doing like a lot of I had to do all this research on employment for like the new generation coming up. And basically, even back then, they were talking about having internships that were paid. Like you weren't allowed to not pay your interns in, I know like parts of Canada. I forget where it was, but so it's been going on for a while. It's not like something new. I also wanted to ask you guys a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Hola.
in the sense, okay, since we're talking about minimum wage and everything, if we are accepting, or for those who are accepting the government to like control minimum wage and stuff like that, logically, shouldn't these people also be okay with the government controlling interest rates and like prices of things in just like the market or whatever? So like stuff in the grocery store, right? They technically, if you're okay with minimum wage being controlled by the government, shouldn't you be okay with bananas being, priced as well?
I got to be honest. I think generally speaking, people's support of the minimum wage comes from a much more emotional place. Really, it's not. I generally think that the support for the minimum wage is, first of all, it's not really well thought out, because if the minimum wage has gone up to $14 clearly,
I'm too lazy. Give me money.
no, but clearly, it started off as 0 and it kept going up and up and up and up and up. It's an emotional ploy that people keep falling for. So I really think people supported the minimum wage, something that's really not well thought of. People really don't go too deeply into it, and to them it's just like, oh, I'm making more money. What does it matter? There's more money in my pocket. That's what a lot of these people are thinking about. I really don't think that they really think about a lot of these bigger implications, and because of this, it is a very messy situation, and kind of how we got to where we are now, really.
Look, honestly, I think the best solution is to implement communism.
That's what it's coming to.
All right. To answer Nadine's question, from my perspective, I don't think the minimum wage is about the government being able to control what everyone's wages is. The minimum wage is more of like where the line can be ethically drawn on how little a company is allowed to pay an employee while it's still being ethical.
Okay,
right?
but why are we letting the government control it?
Well, thing is, Mark. Gotta think of it this way, because at the end of the day, labor is a market just like anything else. Essentially, if you're controlling the price of labor, then you are controlling the price of a certain industry, in which case then the idea of controlling other prices and controlling prices of other industries.
There's a difference between like outright controlling the price of labor and outright saying this is as little as you're allowed to pay somebody, but like still my problem with the minimum wage right now is there's no like breathe room right now. Like it's drawn way too high from where it should be for businesses to still be able to thrive while still having a little bit of regulation on what businesses can ethically do, right? I just think it's way too high. I'm not 100% in favor of getting rid of it altogether. Like it's from my perspective, it's more about drawing an ethical line of you can't pay. Like, we can't be like Mexico and pay our employees dirt cheap because we can get away with it and there's no regulation there, right? While people are still living in poverty.
See, I don't think that's entirely possible, and I'm going to tell you why. Because look at a country like Mexico and a country like Canada; they're both in very different stages of their own development. For example, you have countries like Mexico, China, and all that stuff. The reason why they have sweatshops and the reason why they have really poor working conditions is because if you look at the West in particular. 150 years ago, they were in the same place. So it's the whole idea of, I guess you could say, you know, them as a people kind of developing mentally, socially, economically, and all that stuff. We're up at the stage now where I think even if there was no federal minimum wage, people won't be getting paid these really low, you know, wages, and people won't be, you know, I guess you could say getting into these really bad conditions because historically speaking, the West has already been through this. And the West already knows what a lot of mistakes are. Meanwhile, a lot of these states, they're really starting to figure things out. So I'm going to say that's really the core difference.
And it?
Did someone say something?
Yeah.
I said a lot.
Yeah, you were cutting off a little bit. I'm gonna parrot what you're saying and just like look at the minimum wage and lack of the minimum wage on in a basic economics graph. Increasing minimum wage means that more people want to work because simple jobs will pay them more. So that means supply for labor is going to increase. Meanwhile, for companies, they don't want to hire the same amount of people because they're losing that money. Like they see themselves as losing the money if the minimum, because they have to pay more money. So the demand for labor gets slower, and that's not how economics works. Meanwhile, in like the difference between somewhere like Mexico and somewhere like Canada or the United States is that Mexico is not as developed economically. Therefore, people are in a much worse economic situation that they will take just about any job that can make them money. And at the same time, as we know, there's a lot of immigration from Mexico to America, be it legal or not, because America offers better jobs and better pay, because the people are not doing well in Mexico. When you look at somewhere like America or Canada, you can minimum wage or not, you're getting a much better quality job, and you're making more money compared to Mexico. So it's really about the economic development. Now, obviously, I agree. You shouldn't like have no minimum wage and incentivize companies to pay people the least amount they would. But at the same time, even with minimum wage in places like America, with government regulation, companies still hire immigrants and pay them dirt cheap anyway because they're free labor, basically.
I agree with most of.
Yeah.
My only real complaint is that I agree that Canada is a more economically developed country, and therefore wouldn't be, even if we did get rid of the minimum wage, it wouldn't succumb down to other countries like Mexico that can get away with that. But my problem is there's no guarantee that Canada will stay an economically developed country 50 years down the line.
Yeah, especially because Canada is a very popular country for people to come to. A lot of people come to Canada because it's very, I guess, immigrant friendly when it comes to jobs and etc.
There's a middle ground there. Like, obviously, if Canada has some economic collapse down the line and the minimum wage is $14, we're fucked. Like, it's just done. There's no way companies can compete with that. But at the same time, if there's no regulation at all, and then that field is sort of cleared out so companies can get away with whatever they want, the government doesn't have any regulatory power over these companies, that could be a potential problem as well.
In what sense?
Well, in the sense, I mean, we saw that, like, let's say another global Great Depression happens. The minimum wage is $14. The government's not going to lower that down, or it has no easy problem going that down. Obviously, during a depression, we cannot afford to pay our employees that amount of money. But at the same amount of time, getting a lot of feedback from someone. But Sorry, am I the only one that's hearing that?
I'm hearing
I
that.
can hear it, but I
I
can't tell
think
who's
I think it's coming from Justin because this floor in this building is very loud. Could
Oh,
you
you
be
guys in
coming
the
from?
building?
Yeah, he's my student.
But at the same time, though, you know, if there's no government regulation and we give business basically the ability legally to treat its employees as unethically as they want, they may not be allowed to get away with it technically in the economy today. But if that economy collapses down the line, or if anything should happen, and like that field is open for companies to get away with that, they will. No, like I'm concerned of making a certain regulation to ensure that that doesn't happen should the worst happen in the future.
Situation where the economy collapses, I think what's going to happen is that the market is really going to adjust to the best given scenario. What's going to happen is that when you have regulation, that is naturally going to bring the price of everything up because you're going to have to pay someone to enforce these regulations. And because of this, what's going to happen is that, especially when you're talking in terms of situation of a depression, what's going to happen is that you're going to be in a situation where less people are going to be hired because prices are still going to be up now. In a situation where there's no federal minimum wage, what's going to happen is in a situation of depression, naturally wages are going to go down, but the price of everything else is going to go down as well because what's going to happen is that people, at the end of the day, businesses need to make money any way possible. They need to do whatever they can to sell their products. And if that means lowering the prices to the average wage or whatever, then that would obviously be done.
Actually, if you really think about it, the people who want to push for increasing minimum wage are the same people who are going to push for increasing minimum wage when there's an economic collapse because they have no idea how economics works. So when you see an economic collapse or depression, these same people are going to be like, raise the minimum wage so people can make more money so we can get the economy back up. That's not how it works, mate. But
generally speaking, when there's an economic crash or collapse, I really think the best thing to do would be to leave the economy alone and let it recover because it eventually will.
Yep.
I mean, sort of. I mean, even during the only global Great Depression that happened back in the 30s, like even while like the market was mostly left alone. Oh no, I know you're not an FDR fan, and I honestly don't know a lot of his policies in regards to how that affected the Great Depression. But what I do know is that, you know, even though everything was dirt cheap, and like that was beneficial for rich folk because everything, and they could just literally buy whatever they want for the least amount of money. But most people, like 90% of people or more, could not buy shit, even though everything was still low. Like, I don't know 100% why that was. I still got to read my FDR book. I'm excited for that, but
because people weren't making much money in the first place to be able to
Another
buy
thing
anything.
is that a lot of people didn't have jobs when the New Deal was introduced. Unemployment rates went up to double digits. I remember, I believe at the peak, the unemployment rate went up to around 20%. And interestingly enough, that's when the New Deal was introduced. It was for a good 10 to 15 years. The unemployment rate was pretty fucking high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason was I don't know much about the Great Depression, but I'm assuming that the unemployment rate was going higher because businesses wanted to keep whatever money they had and not spending on employing people, which goes back to what I said. They don't businesses tend to not take long-term risks, but rather short-term risks. The more money you can keep in your pocket, the more insured you are to not lose it. Meanwhile, if you invest in hiring workers, which in that situation would have, in the long run, actually made the economy better, they wouldn't have as much money in their pockets. So they probably didn't lean towards that decision.
Just a heads up, I want to try and wrap this up in like the next 10, 15 minutes, and I want to give you each like your own time to give your own closure and whatnot. There was just heads up for that.
All right, all our heads are up.
Yep. I don't know if we still got more to discuss amongst each other for now before we just give our closing comments.
Don't raise minimum wage. Keep it at a reasonable level.
Yeah, I think this actually is going to be my comment because we're going to be, I guess,
work on other aspects of the economy to allow it to work as well, because simply raising the minimum wage isn't going to fix everything. You're going to need to work on other things to make it work as well.
Okay. I think I can let everyone have their closing comments now then, yeah?
think in terms of fixing the economy in general, a lot needs to be done. In this situation, this minimum wage is, like I said, personally, I'd like to abolish it. However, you really can't abolish it in one go. I really think what needs to be done, given that we are at this point right now, 14 to 20 something year plan to slowly lower the minimum wage till it's going to be necessary. And there will be some hard times at first as the economy will adjust. However, long term, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a much more market-driven economy, or you're going to have, you're going to generally have a much more controlled, I guess you could say, private sector. And I think one other thing is that people are generally going to be making much smarter decisions for themselves. For example, I think the whole idea of raising a minimum wage salary, I think that it's obviously still going to be there. You can't get rid of anything completely, but I think that's mostly going to be gone. So in conclusion, we need to slowly abolish the minimum wage.
All right, Nadine.
That actually goes back to the appeal to emotion, because if
last comment,
as you said, like in the long term, it's beneficial, and I agree with that. People are still going to go to appeal to emotion and say, but in the hard times, you're going to be hurting people, and people aren't going to be making much money. And that's kind of where the argument is.
Okay.
Well, I think that's where the flaws of democracy come in.
Democracy is an illusion.
But no, I mean, generally speaking, well, that's how we got here to begin with. Constant appeals to emotion, right?
Sadly.
Maybe not.
Unfortunately.
Is my microphone working? I wasn't seeing.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Oh, no, actually, I can't hear you at all.
Oh, yes. I wasn't seeing the green dots there for a second. All right, I'm going to let everyone give their closing comments now, one by one. We'll start with Nadine.
Okay, I guess all I have to really say is that, it's a vicious cycle. If you raise the minimum wage, then you have to raise the price of the products that you're selling, and then nobody's going to come in, and, it's just a vicious cycle. So I don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think the government should be involved at all. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Nadine. Christian, you're up next.
At least it wasn't a fire alarm.
I don't think it should be increased.
Guys.
It's just not doing anybody any good. They're just going to keep asking for more and more money, and it's just going to give people. Again, we went over this, but I still believe that it's not going to make people want to do anything other than work at some whatever minimum wage job. They're not going to want to contribute to society any more than they need to when they just have enough to make themselves comfortable. I think personally everybody should be doing their best to contribute to society, whether it be getting some type of valuable skill and doing something that they've always wanted to do, instead of just taking the easy way out and just being another kind of sheep, I guess, is the word I'm going to use. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Cal, I know you kind of gave your spiel already. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Well, no, I just kind of want to round everything up quickly. Basically, long story short, the minimum wage does need to be abolished. I do believe the minimum wage causes a lot of economic restraints. It hurts economic growth. So it hurts people's opportunity to get jobs, and it makes business owners more reluctant to hire jobs. And I think in terms of social effects, a constant increasing minimum wage encourages bad behavior. I explained that earlier. And I think it also kind of gives people more room to make bad decisions and be, I guess you could say, fine with it, So, in short, abolish the minimum wage, and you're going to have social and economic benefits in the long term.
Okay, thanks, Cal. Justin, you're up next.
All right, thank you. So, to wrap things up, while I do like seeing more money coming back into my pocket with increasing minimum wage, I think timing in terms of bringing minimum wage up should be slower than what it shows today. At the very least, minimum wage should at least keep up with inflation, because if I'm making the same wage that has decreasing value over time, then really that isn't doing anything for me or for the economy at all whatsoever.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Maggie, you're up next.
So I think I've expressed my thoughts fairly clearly through this. The minimum wage itself is a bad idea. Raising a minimum wage to $14 or $15 is incredibly stupid, and it's honestly just a way for the Liberal Party to try buying votes, because people our age will see, oh, look, I have more money, for those of us who don't get our hours cut quite severely, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm not paying my hydro yet, I'm not paying the carbon tax in a visible way I can see, I just have more money, I'll vote Liberal because they gave me more money.
Okay, last, but I guess I'll get mine at the end. But Lewis, you're next.
I kind of agree with the general consensus here, though I do want to point out that I also see some some truth to what Justin said. I feel like Khaled said, just what should be done is that the minimum wage should be experimented with, slowly decreased. I mean, if at the rate it's going up, I don't know the statistics, but I assume that the economy is not doing well with the minimum wage going up. So I feel like the best idea for now is to actually take it down slowly, not at the same rate it's gone up, and sort of calibrate it to fit with the economy. So when you see a certain minimum wage, as you drop it over time, when you see unemployment going down and factoring other things in, when you see the economy doing better, you can stick to that number, I guess. But obviously there's a lot of factors to weigh in, something could happen in the economy, it could go bad, it could flourish, etc., etc. That should be that's why economists exist, to look into this and think about it. Also, one last comment is democracy is an illusion of freedom, and it's simply a simulation, not actually freedom.
All right, thank you, Lewis. My final thoughts. I think I'm a little more left than most of the people that are here. I do believe that there should be. I do believe that there should be a minimum wage. The government has business to regulate some things. It should be the government's job to make sure that the water you get from your tap isn't dirty. It should be the government's job that the food that you're buying is safe to eat, or whatever, and that companies can't sell you food that isn't safe to eat or expired. And I think it should be the government's job to ensure that companies can't pay you a wage that is very clearly inhumane. However, I thought the $11.40 minimum wage was already a little above that in regards to what the economy can handle. The $14 minimum wage is way, way above that. I think I'd agree with what Maggie said, that Kathleen Wynne almost did it as just a vote grab to
it 100% is. That's no question. It is a vote.
No. So I'm not for abolishing the minimum wage altogether, but a $14 minimum wage I don't think is an ethical decision. It's an $11.40 minimum wage was not unethical by any means. And it's just not something that the Canadian economy or the Ontario economy can handle right now, and we're going to see the negative effects of that in the future.
That's why we should appeal to the centrism meme and simply work on a healthy middle, not have big government.
For the record, I think Ron Swanson should become prime minister somehow.
Ron Swanson? Oh, yes. All right, well, I think that about wraps it up then. Next week, we're going to be doing another stream at the same time about the United Nations, so that should be pretty interesting.
Oh, boy.
And I know we have, exactly, I know we have a little bit more of a diverse opinion set about that issue, so it should be pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to stop broadcasting right now. Thanks a lot, guys.
You're welcome.